What's up, everybody? Yeah. Welcome to the Mike Dolce Show. Today, we are talking about Francis Ngannou, and we're breaking down why he really departed from the UFC. And I think this is a part of the narrative that most of the mainstream media is missing, and they're bending. I have a few ideas why, but I'm not going to get into that deeply. What I wanted to do is I want to share a clip from Francis Ngannou's interview with Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour, in which Francis breaks down exactly what happened. And Ariel asks a very specific question. And I'm going to let that play for you so we can listen to Francis's own words. And then I'm going to break down exactly what this means. This is the real reason that Francis left. Francis did not want to leave the UFC. The UFC did not want Francis to leave. But something Francis asked for, which was irrelevant, and he knew it, broke the deal. So, Mike Dolce, four-time world MMA trainer of the year, the most successful to have ever done it. I have been working inside the UFC since the late 1990s with some of the world's greatest athletes. I know the contracts, I know the organizations, I know the ins, I know the outs, I know the real deal, I know the side letters, I know the undisclosed purses. I understand better than almost every other person on the planet what goes on behind the scenes. And I'm going to share that with you right now. So let's bring in this scene from Francis. Pop myself right down there. Let's listen to what he has to say, and then I will further discuss with you. So what Ariel's saying first is the UFC offered Francis Ngannou more money, and Francis agrees, more money than Brock Lesnar was paid. The contract that was on the table for Francis Ngannou was to make him the highest paid heavyweight in the history of the UFC. So what Ariel's establishing right now is that Francis Ngannou was about to make at least $8 million for not just his next fight, but $8 million for at least the next three fights. This is a $24 million 3-fight or 1-year deal if you look at the UFC contracts. So let's listen in. So once again, normally, let me jump off that. Normally, the UFC, they sign you into a minimum of a 4-fight, but 8-fight deals. For a champion, they want an 8-fight deal. They want to lock you in for the next championship fight. They want to lock you in for if you win the fight, they want it. No sound on the MMA Hour. Let me see. Sorry, guys. Let me see if I can jump in and fix this here. Apologize for that. That is unfortunate. I wonder if the MMA Hour is actually blocking that. I understand why they would do that. That would be quite unfortunate for us. So let me just remove that from the screen right here. If you guys want to hang out for a second, ask me some questions inside the chat. Let's see if we can. Let me see. The sound is output USD. Let me jump on over here. Make sure it's not on my side. Does not appear to be on my side. Good. It might be on, unfortunately, the side of the MMA Hour. And I understand why they would do that. Let's see if we can get through that, because this is a fair use broadcast. We would be working within all the appropriate confines of YouTube and fair use. Let me see here. Jumping through broadcast. Yes. This all appears to be correct. Pop this here. Okay. Yes, yes, yes. So it's looking like everything that we're doing on our side is correct. Makes it unfortunate right now. And I haven't, so I was just trying to play it directly from Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour show. Unfortunately, I do not have the ability at this time to do that. What we can do later on, because this is a live broadcast, we can actually cut that clip down and then reshare that clip in another video. But what I can do is I can let this run in the background and I can actually talk over it for you. As long as you guys don't mind that, let's jump ahead and let's do that here. So as Ariel and Francis are talking, let me just see one other aspect here. General. Yep. Apology. I don't like to do this, guys, but we're in the middle of the broadcast and I could have checked this, but we have done these accounts before. So that's what my assumption is. It's being blocked by the provider, which would be, let me see this here, audio. Yeah, this is Did you guys hear that? Did you hear that? It was all pretty awesome. I like that. Near my camera. Yep. Audio, virtual. Don't need that. Recordings, layout. Yes. And boom. Audio avatars. That works extremely well. Yes. The audio, once again, the mic is set up. Let me try this one. Guys, let me know. Does this, I'm going to play it again. Let me know if this works just in the comments. Can you hear this? Does that work? Does that work? So you can kind of read. Let me know in the comments. I'm going to read through. So what Ariel said was, all right, Brock Lesnar made at least $8 million. That's been confirmed. Francis, were you making $8 million? And Francis says, yes, he was going to make at least $8 million for the John Jones fights. And Francis then said, the UFC wanted to sign you to an 8-fight deal. Francis, you requested a 3-fight deal, and the UFC said, yes, for you, we will give you a 3-fight deal instead of an 8-fight deal. All right, can't hear anything on that side, so don't worry about that right now, guys and girls. I'm going to just run through this for you. So Francis Ngannou, he was being paid more than any UFC athlete, heavyweight, have ever been paid. He would have been the second highest paid athlete in the history of the UFC. Outside of it would have been Conor McGregor, then Francis Ngannou. He was guaranteed 3 fights, which is huge for the UFC to give him 3 fights. And it was going to be John Jones. It was going to be Stipe Miocic, and then possibly a rematch with John Jones. Now, the era is saying, hey, you mentioned that there was a few things you asked that the UFC doesn't talk about. Can you tell us what these things are? Now, listen, now watch, read here, but I'm gonna run it for you. What are these sticking points that the UFC didn't want to give up? Ariel asks. It was a lot of them, Francis says. You don't go in to the negotiation table expecting to get everything you want. And this is where Francis blows up the deal. Remember, he got $8 million per fight. He got a shortened 3-fight deal. That's amazing. And then his freedom. He's saying when you negotiate, you want your partner to at least show you a willingness to try. I asked for a lot of things, but it doesn't mean I was expecting to get those things. I was expecting to get 1 or 2 out of those things. I asked for a sponsorship, the right of sponsorship, which we've been ripped off. I asked for a health insurance, a fighter advocate, somebody in the board meeting who will advocate for a fighter. I asked for that. I couldn't have those things. I just wanted them to know that there's something I do want. Did they consider any of those things? Ariel asked. No, 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 no. Let's go this one more time. What I Let's go here. First of all, I asked for a sponsorship. So Francis, he wanted his own sponsorship. He asked for health insurance, and he asked for a fighter advocate to be at the board meetings. Now, let me stop here. Let me speak directly to you guys. Now, I know. So I'm going to play this video back. Don't worry. But let me talk through this right now. All right. So for all of those you who are just joining in right now, I'm talking about the interview Francis Ngannou did with Ariel Helwani. And Francis Ngannou made some fatal flaws in his negotiations with the UFC. And Ariel exposes that, but doesn't bring attention to it. So what is on the table? On the table is Francis Ngannou to continue competing as the UFC's heavyweight champion. He's the reigning heavyweight champion. But dare I say, Francis Ngannou is not the greatest heavyweight of all time. Francis Ngannou is let me just briefly give you a quick snapshot on Francis's record here. Francis is 17-3. His wins are Cyril Gane. He beat Stipe Miocic in the rematch after Stipe had beat him. Francis Ngannou lost to Stipe Miocic in 2018. He lost to Derek Lewis in 2018. Then he came back. He beat Curtis Blaydes. He beat Cain Velasquez in just a terrible fight that Cain never should come back from, a knockout in 26 seconds. He beat Junior Dos Santos, like a retirement fight. He beat Jairzinho Rosenstruck, who is credible. Then he beats Stipe with a punch, and he beats Cyril Gane by decision. Now, by no means am I diminishing Francis Ngannou, but I am saying Francis Ngannou is not the reigning. Let me put this more clear. Stipe Miocic beat Mark Hunt, Andrei Arlovsky, beat former K1 world champion Mark Hunt, former UFC world champion Andrei Arlovsky, former UFC world champion Fabricio Verdum, former Pride Strikeforce world champion Alistair Overeem, former UFC world champion Junior Dos Santos, soon to be UFC world champion Francis Ngannou in 2018. He had a loss to Daniel Cormier in 2018, where he lost the title. Then he comes back and he beats Daniel Cormier twice more. Daniel Cormier is on the GOAT list, two division world champion. So I only say that because, damn, Stipe Miocic put in the work. Francis has done well, but Francis has not done nearly what Stipe Miocic has done. Stipe Miocic has not gotten close to the contract that Francis Ngannou was getting. To be fair, let's call this as it is. Now, as we move forward, let's talk about the negotiation itself. Francis sat at the table. It's time to renegotiate his contract to fight John Jones. The UFC gave Francis everything he wanted financially. He was going to be the highest paid heavyweight in the history of the UFC, higher paid than even Brock Lesnar, which means Francis was going to make more than $8 million for his very next fight against John Jones. Francis also asked for a 3-fight deal, no exceptions, and the UFC granted him a 3-fight deal. The UFC never does that. That is a huge ask. Then Francis goes on to say, I asked for a bunch of other things because when you negotiate, you want to know that the other side hears you. So I asked for a bunch of other things, knowing I wasn't going to get most of them, but I wanted one or two. The UFC gave you a 3-fight contract, Francis. They gave you a 3-fight contract. They never do that. So instead of a 3-fight contract, maybe if you push for an athlete liaison, which he asked for, maybe if you pushed for some form of sponsorship deal, you would have gotten it. Maybe if you pushed for some sort of healthcare accommodation, you would have gotten it. But you got the 3-fight deal instead. This is where the contract broke. This is where it broke. Now, Francis is being heralded for asking for athlete health care. Now, to be fair, the athletes get health care. It's not often publicized. I know, and I won't say his name to embarrass him, the UFC paid over $100,000 for a back surgery for one of my athletes. And it happened outside of training. It was more of a genetic issue. It was a lifestyle issue. He had a spine issue, working years in construction as his fight career took off. It did not happen. He did not have a spinal injury inside the octagon. This athlete had a back problem, and the UFC spent over $100,000 to fix his back problem. That's never been reported. And the UFC didn't have to do it because it didn't have anything to do with his training camp. It didn't have anything to do with his damages in fight. Now, I know, and you guys know, the UFC covers injuries. I've never heard of the UFC, honestly. I have never had one athlete ever tell me the UFC declined to cover their injuries, whether it was out of season, in season, during training camp, or during a fight. True story. Now, any other athlete can come and say, hey, well, they refused mine. That's fine. So when it comes down to healthcare, what doesn't the UFC cover? The UFC doesn't cover a copay for a Z-Pack that you can walk into urgent care like the rest of America does. Now, my healthcare, I run a S corporation, which all UFC athletes should run something similar, in my opinion. The UFC athlete is an independent contractor, which means they own their own business, which means healthcare should not be the responsibility of the UFC. These athletes are thinking with a poverty mindset. You know what healthcare costs me for my entire family of 4? $800 per month. $800 per month for me to pay for healthcare for myself, for my wife, for my 2 daughters. $400 or $800 per month. Now, I'd rather not pay $800 per month, but at the same time, the average UFC athlete, now do your research, the average UFC athlete makes $140,000 per year. This is widely publicized. The average UFC athlete makes $140,000 per year. The average salary in the United States is less than $50,000. The average UFC salary is 3 times what the average hardworking American is making to work 40 hours, 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year. Why are we talking about $800, $400, $200 a month healthcare? A single independent UFC athlete can get their own awesome healthcare for less than $300 per month and get a high deductible plan because the UFC is going to cover all of your injuries. So they can likely get that much less if you go to any of the exchanges. This is real talk. Francis also said he wanted sponsorships. Dude, come on. The UFC owns the distribution rights of their media. The UFC is a media company. They're going to give you Condom Depot. They're going to allow you to walk in with Condom Depot on your shorts if you want to. Of course not. Of course not. You cannot get onto an airplane wearing any old shirt you want. You will get kicked off an airplane for wearing a logo or dressing in attire that is inappropriate. So if you can't, now real talk, if you can't fly on an airplane wearing anything you want, how can you work inside the UFC? Wearing anything you want. So I believe Francis blew this up. I believe he doesn't know how to negotiate properly. He should have had Ali, sorry, Ali. I always say your name, and I don't want to be disrespectful. He should have Ali come in and negotiate. He should have had Malky from First Round come in and negotiate. He should have had Audiator come in and negotiate. He should have had Brad Slater come in and negotiate. He should have had one of the heavy hitters come in and negotiate, not himself. Because what happened, he negotiated himself out of a 3-fight, $24 million plus deal. Now, Francis Ngannou very well might walk into a Tyson Fury fight. Francis might. Francis might get a $30 million paycheck to fight Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury will destroy Francis Ngannou. He will destroy him. Tyson Fury will beat Francis Ngannou so badly, Francis Ngannou's next fight will be, maybe he'll get a couple million, maybe. So at the end of the contract, at the end of all this, Francis will not be that far ahead, not that better off than had he stayed in the UFC. And that's fine. He can go anywhere he wants. He's an independent contractor. And in the interview with Ariel, he says, hey, I'm an independent contractor. He put out a statement on his own channel saying, I'm an independent contractor. I have to do what I think is best. And that is awesome. And I'm not saying he didn't do what he thought was best for him, but I do not believe Francis was doing what he felt was best for the athletes. Because if he felt he was doing what was best for the athletes while negotiating, he would have said, okay, listen, I will give you back the 3-fight deal. I will take the 8-fight deal that you offered me. Give these athletes health care instead. Put an athlete representative inside the boardroom meetings. Give us some sort of better sponsorship package. But he didn't. He didn't. And that is why the contract blew up. What do you guys think? Leave comments below. I'll actually parse. I'll contact the guys over at and gals over at MMA Fighting, and I'll see why I couldn't get that video recording, why they wouldn't allow it to play. I didn't want to cut it. I just wanted to play it directly from YouTube to avoid any sort of fair use issue. I always like to link back and give them full credit and whatnot. So let me see what was going on over there. But thank you guys. Leave comments below. What do you think? What do you think happened? Remember, click the links below this video. Summer Shredded, Shred Dad, Sculpt and Tone for Women, 3 weeks to Shredded, Living Lean, and the Summer Shredded $1,000 giveaway is going on right now. Awesome stuff. Click those links below to learn more.